Today I'm skimming a book from the best-selling God-Wink series, Divine Alignment, How God-Wink Moments Guide Your Journey, by Squire Rushnell. Divine alignment, some examples of it. Let's say that you haven't seen this person in a long time and the thought of this person pops into your head, and then that very same day you get a phone call from them. Or maybe you bump into someone who led you to a new job or a new relationship. Or maybe you bump into someone who leads you to an opportunity that totally changes your life. And then afterward you think back and say, wow, what a coincidence that I ran into that person and it led to that. But did you ever ask yourself, what caused that person to be right there at that exact moment in your path? It was divine alignment, which is the arrangement of coincidences into a pattern of alignment so astonishing that they could have only come from a higher source. So in this book, the author shares some very moving stories about stories that he experienced himself, and also he shares stories from other people's lives that show the awesome strength that is inherent in what he calls God's positioning system, or GPS. And he says all of us can use our own personal GPS to grow more closely aligned with God, to become vastly more effective, successful, and fulfilled in our relationships, our careers, and everything we do. So the God-Wink series started back in 2011. I believe this might be the second book in the series. This was published in 2012. The first one, I believe, was titled When God Winks at You, and I recall reading that. That was a good book. But the series of books became a worldwide phenomenon, and it's a book series that demonstrates how divine coincidences can abruptly change our lives for the better. It's filled with stories of hope and encouragement. Now, the term God-Wink has several definitions. A God-Wink can mean a sign of hope from God. It can be another word for answered prayer. It's a coincidence that's not really a coincidence because it's divinely orchestrated. It's a person-to-person message from God. Overall, it's a coincidental experience that is so astonishing, you know that it could only have come from God. So the author is saying in this book that there's a divine connection between people and events, and between challenges and solutions, especially when you are asking God to work in your favor and you're in prayer. Now, the last time I experienced a divine alignment, I'm just going to tell a quick story and then I'll get back to the book, was when my husband and I were looking to sell our house and move into an apartment. We weren't sure it was the right thing to do. We had been on a list for more than 2 years at an apartment complex in another town. And one day we got a phone call to come look at an apartment that was available. Now, my husband had been praying, just saying, Lord, if this is right, if we're supposed to sell our house, if we're going to be happy in this apartment, let it be a second floor apartment at the corner of the building. And sure enough, when we were led to look at the apartment, it was on the second floor at the corner of the building. Now, in his mind, a second floor apartment means more privacy, and a corner apartment means more windows, because we need sunshine to be happy. And we had gotten used to setting out on our front porch and soaking up the morning sun. And of course, one of the windows faces the morning sun. So we can sit in our living room in the morning and soak up that sunlight. God knew that we were not going to be happy if we weren't able to do that, because it's something we got in the habit of doing at our home front porch. So that was the first thing that needed to divinely align, was the right apartment. And then the next thing was the step of selling our house, which I was dreading. I imagined all these people tramping through my house and having to leave every time the realtor brought them through, and, just having to get rid of all the stuff. And it was just an overwhelming thought. But anyway, it turns out we did not even have to get a realtor. We didn't even have to put our house on the market. God used a family member and a conversation that he had with someone he worked with who was looking to buy a house. He was looking for 2 years, he and his wife. So he said, why don't you give the guy a call who was my husband and see if maybe you can go look at their house, and, you know, if you like it, it might work out. So they came to look at our house, and I knew very, very quickly that this was the couple that I had prayed would buy our house, because I didn't want our house to go to just somebody who was going to trash it or rent it out. And, you know, I wanted somebody to, renting out wouldn't have been bad, but I'm talking about like a slumlord who just, you know, doesn't take care of a place but just wants to rake in the money. I didn't want that to happen. So I prayed for the right couple, and I knew that this was them because of how excited they were and how much they loved the house. And also his wife, I learned very quickly that she was a believer and she had been praying too. So God will take two praying people and line them up to make the prayers of both of them be answered. It's incredible the way it all fell together, and the fact that we didn't have to pay a realtor allowed us to give them the house at a lower price than what we know we could have gotten. So it just all came together, and of course we paid attorney fees, but that was a fraction of what you'd pay when you pay a realtor. So it was, we look back on that, and it's just so amazing at how God lined that all up, because we had been praying, and this is an example of divine alignment. So the author says that each of us is born with a GPS. He says God's positioning system, that's what GPS stands for, and it's when God operates in a way that divinely aligns us with people and events that assist us in reaching our destiny and keep us from losing our way. So it's a way of keeping us on track. He says you are part of an incredible plan that was programmed into your DNA long before you were born. You just need to communicate with your navigator, God. And when you do that, you'll discover it's your daily dialogue with Him that enables you to effectively program your GPS. And when you program your GPS regularly through conversations with the navigator, you will experience answered prayers, or another term for that, God winks. And it's during these quiet times with your Maker that you're also giving Him an opportunity to speak to you through the still small voice within. You may be surprised at the number of times during prayer that a perfect idea pops into your head, and during these moments of complete attention, you are more apt to be actively listening for God's guidance. And you can talk to your navigator about anything, and the Bible provides you with that permission in John 15:7. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. So he's saying that it may appear on the surface that nothing's happening, but in fact, God is working behind the scenes, connecting invisible threads, getting people and events in place for God winks and divine alignments to unfold, so your prayers can be answered. Yes, it sometimes takes a long time, longer than we want, but if you were to research the matter completely, you would find overwhelming evidence in both contemporary and ancient history, as recorded in the scriptures, that God does answer prayers, even if it takes years. Sometimes, though, your prayers are answered right away, so quickly that it astonishes you. So when you pray and think nothing's happening, or worse, that you're being ignored from above, God is still working on your behalf in ways you cannot see. He talks about an inner sense that is felt so clearly that you know it's a communication from God. Have you ever felt that? He says most people who read the Bible on a regular basis soon find that ideas or solutions come into their minds while they are reading. And what he says about that In the final analysis, when you engage the navigator, he engages you. And this is a promise that each of us has been given. It's written in ancient scripture. Believe you will receive everything you ask for in prayer. And that's Matthew 21:25. So think for a moment of the many ways that your inner compass provides you with hidden impulses day in and day out. Warning you to stop to avoid danger, or urging you to bravely step out of your comfort zone to do something that he has intended you to do. Now, I felt that when I started this channel. I just couldn't get it off my mind. And it was way out of my comfort zone. But I knew that he'd be with me and he'd be helping me. And he has for 2 years now. It's November 1st now, but October was my 2-year anniversary for YouTube. So, he's proven to me time and again, he's helping me with ideas. And I've talked in past videos about the way that he helps me put these videos together. I'm not going to get into that, but any mother who has awoken in the middle of the night, sensing that she needs to check on her child, knows that your inner compass even works when you're asleep. So you do receive God winks, and you do have divine alignment all the time. You're like a radio, but if you don't plug in and tune in, you will never receive God's messages. Now, there's a great example of divine alignment in this book, and it takes us back to 1971. A woman named Jane Ellis, she prayed every night for the safe return of an American POW named Leo. He was captured in Vietnam. And her church youth group met every Wednesday to pray for a whole list of POWs. And she was wearing a bracelet with his name on it, and she vowed not to take it off until he returned home. And then in 1973, she watched on television the return of the man that she prayed for 2 years, and other prisoners of war, but he was one of them. And she was finally able to take off that bracelet that she wore for 2 years with his name on it, put it in a box, and forgot about it. And then, 40 years later, she and her husband received free tickets to an Astros game. And before the game started, a white-haired man walked onto the field to throw the ceremonial first pitch. And it was announced that that man had received the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was a former prisoner of war named Colonel Leo Thorsness. Well, she immediately jumped out of her seat. She couldn't believe this. And then God set in motion a series of events that allowed her to meet this man that very same day. She had to go through a lot of people to get to him. And she told him that she had prayed for him every night. And this is the conversation between them. Just a short conversation. She said, "I prayed for you every night." He said, "It was a very unpopular war. The guards repeatedly told us, you will die here." So she told him about the bracelet she wore and the prayers that she prayed for 2 years. He said, "Many nights we couldn't sleep, but other nights we slept like babies, and now I know why." There was a moment of silence, perhaps a moment of honor for the awe each was feeling in that millisecond. Somehow among all of these thousands of people, against all odds, these two individuals had an invisible thread of connection and had just been, by God's grace, connected. "You are my hero," said Jane softly. "No, Colonel Thorsness, you are my hero." So I thought that was my favorite example in this book of divine alignment and how God aligns people for his purposes and for his glory, and just to make lives more enriched for so many reasons. We each receive impulses from an inner compass, and it is up to us to respond to those nudges in order for the divine alignment that has been planned for us to unfold. Our inner compass is that quiet, still, small voice that is often drummed out by the loud external voices all around us, the often overbearing yet well-meaning voices of family and friends who try to redirect our paths to fit their comfort zones. It's never too late to reach for the volume control, to turn down the loud, annoying voices from others or yourself. You can have your dreams. Turn up that still small voice within. I made a video about a book I read titled The Dream Giver. And in that video, I talked about family and friends who try to keep you within a certain border because if you go after your dreams, it makes them uncomfortable. And I think that's what he's talking about here. And that book is under my Skim a Bestseller playlist if you want to check it out. So the conclusion, if you have yet to decide, I can tell you that there is considerable data confirming that people who live their lives in the light, basically following the rules of the Ten Commandments, they have happier, healthier lives than those who remain on the dark rail. So the author, he spends a chapter in this book convincing people that heaven is a real destiny, and he tells several stories of people who saw heaven, and he makes an interesting point about the similarities in the stories of people who have had near-death experiences, saw heaven, and then came back to earth. And he lists 15 separate elements that recur again and again in these stories of people who claim that they saw heaven. Now, these are people from all different religions and social and educational backgrounds. It's a study of about 150 people. And I'm going to read some of these common things that people say after they witness what they believe was a trip to heaven. It's really amazing. I did a video titled Heaven Stories from people who saw it. And yeah, it's titled Heaven Stories from People Who Saw It. I'm not sure what playlist that would be on, but that's another past video you might want to check out. In fact, I'm going to attach it as an end screen to this video so you can click on it at the end of this video. People who believe what they have witnessed, people who believe that they have witnessed heaven, even though they may or may not have been officially declared dead, they often experience some or all of the following. They experience being outside of their body in the same area, but you become a spectator, like you're looking down on your body. Let's say you were in a car accident. You will look down and see your body laying there while the medics are working on you, that sort of thing. You enter darkness, feeling rapid movement through a tunnel and approaching a distant bright light. A loving being of light greets you non-verbally, and you feel an absence of sorrow. You feel nothing but love and joy. You are greeted by friends and relatives who have been restored to look their very best. I remember in the video Heaven Stories, a man saw his grandmother, and she used to have really bad teeth, but his grandmother had a beautiful smile when he saw her in heaven. You hear intense, extraordinary music and or singing, several compositions happening all at once. I've heard, I believe it was Don Piper, he wrote a book about his experience after a car accident. He was in heaven, and he talked about the beautiful music and the harmonies that all blend together. It's like several songs happening at once, and it's music that like you've never heard before here on earth. There are bright, indescribable colors. You may be told to return and that it's not your time, though you will prefer to stay because of there's so much love and joy in heaven, you won't want to come back to earth. There was a woman in the Heaven Stories who talked about she was depressed for a long time after she came back from heaven because she didn't want to come back to earth. She remembered the feeling of being in heaven, and she just was depressed to have been sent back. And also, you're no longer afraid to die. So those are some of the 15 similarities of people who have experienced heaven, and they talk about the same exact thing, which leads you to believe It's got to be a real place. So there's also amazing data in support of faith, which I'm going to wrap this up with that. Just a few things mentioned here in this book. Believing in God and living in the light, as opposed to the dark, was also cited as a cause of better mental health, and that is in addition to a longer life expectancy. So overall, the majority of studies correlated faith with the following beneficial outcomes: well-being, happiness and life satisfaction, more hope and optimism, purpose and meaning in life, higher self-esteem, better adaptation to bereavement, so you're better able to handle when people you love die, greater social support and less loneliness, lower rates of depression, lower rates of suicide, less anxiety, lower rates of alcohol and drug abuse, less delinquency and criminal activity, and greater marital stability and satisfaction. If you could extend your life by 7 to 14 years and enjoy all of the above benefits, isn't it worth thinking about traveling through life on the light rail instead of the dark one? So, I guess I'll leave you with that question. If you start praying and get close to God, you also will experience divine alignment. I promise you, you will. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for listening. Thanks for staying till the end. And I'll see you next time.